Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be with you. I am honored to demonstrate to you the powers of conscious parenting. If you don't know me, I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm an author of several books on conscious parenting and mindful living. And my goal in life is really to illuminate and highlight the tremendous efficacy and power of this approach to parenting called conscious parenting. When I first wrote my book, The Conscious Parent, this was a revolutionary concept. No one was really talking about conscious parenting in the way I began talking about it. And the nutshell, the foundational blueprint of conscious parenting is that the parent raises themselves as much, if not more, than they raise their children. Most of us have been indoctrinated in the traditional parenting paradigm. So there's the traditional parenting paradigm, and then what I talk about, which is the conscious parenting paradigm. And I want to first begin with the differences between the two in a generic way, and then go into it in a specific way. The traditional parenting paradigm is mainly focused on raising the kid. And it has this premise built in that the parent is holier than thou, that this parent is a selfless, self-righteous being that has children out of the bounty of their selflessness and their generosity, and they are here to raise this child and sacrifice everything in their life to raise this child. This is the premise of the traditional parenting paradigm. Why is it so effed up? Why is it harmful? Right? You and I were raised this way. We aren't that bad. Well, here it is. Here is the nutshell of why this can be a toxic approach. Well, first, we just need to look at the state of the world today to realize that we may be functional, but we adults are not really conscious. So the reason why it's toxic is because in its focus on the child, what it does is that it absolves the parent of any accountability, any responsibility. The focus is the child. So in that, inbuilt there is that there are expectations on this child, because we're here to raise this perfect product called the child. Inbuilt in that, again, is the assumption that if the child doesn't follow the parents' ways, because the parents' job, sacred mission is to raise the child, then if the child is not complying and not obedient, not servile, not listening, the parent can execute any sort of consequence. And that's where parental discipline is such a widely talked about, insidious, toxic belief system and way of being. Parental discipline, where the parent believes it can punish the child, ad lib, arbitrarily do anything to the child, comes from this belief that the parent has that its job is to raise this being, you see? So everything gets justified. You know, we would never dare talk to another adult, never dare scare another adult or punish another adult the way we do our children. But it all comes from this defunct, primitive idea that we are here to raise this child. And raise them how? According to our own belief systems, right? Because we are unquestioned. We do not stop to introspect or to ask ourselves, you know, do I really even know myself before I can raise this child? We don't ask those questions in the traditional paradigm. Inbuilt, again, is this assumption that the parent is at the top of the hierarchy, at the top of the totem pole, and they know how it is they should raise this child. There is no questioning the parental authority. And this is the premise of traditional parenting paradigms that conscious parenting seeks to debunk, dethrone, and discard. It is a fundamental paradigm shift. So if you are here today and you are listening to me, and if you're in any way intrigued or have been following my work, then you have to understand that you are not just going to do parenting differently, but you are going to be a different parent. This is a fundamental philosophical mind shift. Are you ready for this deep level of change? Are you ready for this deep level of transformation? Because conscious parents aren't just for strategies and tools, and they aren't just for raising the perfect child. There is no perfect child to raise. This is all about you. So are you willing to do this deep work to become a transformationally different human being? That's what conscious parenting is about. So it is an invitation to you to shift on such a profoundly deep level that you will fundamentally be altered and then alter your parenting. So it begins from you. So this is my invitation to you as a human to change the way you think, you believe, and the way you are. And that's what conscious parenting does. This is my invitation. This is the call. Are you ready to answer it? So I've written many books on parenting. The Conscious Parent, which was the foundational blueprint of what this method is all about. My next book is called Out of Control, which debunks the archaic belief system that traditional parental discipline is even necessary. It's not even necessary. And any belief that you have that you need to punish your children is a lie. My third book is called The Awakened Family. And here I talk about the mythologies of the traditional parenting paradigm that have had us stuck. So read that book. It's a phenomenal book. And now I'm out with my latest book. It's called The Parenting Map, Step-by-Step Solutions to Consciously Create the Ultimate Parent-Child Relationship. So I will be culling together from all these books this talk to bring to you the foundational principles of how you can become a conscious parent. So this talk will resonate and echo from all my teachings and help you go deeper on this journey so that you can transform your relationship with your children. At the core of conscious parenting is one thing only. It's connection before correction. Connection, connection, connection. And connection doesn't mean to kiss and touch and hug your children or that they come to you with every single problem. Connection means that you are connecting to their essence and you understand who it is they are in their deep essence. And you are allowing that essence to blossom. I'm a clinical psychologist and I work with adults every day. And do you know what the fundamental, common, universal thread of every adult I work with is? It is that they have not flourished in their essence. They are living a false self. They are living as somebody they are not. They are disconnected from who it is they are in their essence. And because of this, they have anxiety, they have disillusionment, they have dysthymia, they have depression, they have all sorts of illnesses that come from a fundamental disconnection to who it is they are in their essence. So my work is about training parents to return to their own essence, to recognize their own essence and to celebrate their own essence. Because if they don't honor and hold true to their own inner alignment, their radar and antenna, your radar and antenna will not be attuned to your children's essence. And what that means is that we begin to understand who our children are at their most organic, authentic state and allow that to blossom. See it as a superpower. So if they are shy and introverted, instead of yelling at them because culture tells us that we should be extroverted and loud and boisterous, we see their shyness and introversion as a superpower. If they are hyperactive and extroverted and boisterous, then we see that as a superpower instead of telling them to shush and to be quiet and to sit in their chair. So as conscious parents, our goal is to meet our own selves so that we can meet our children's self. Conscious parenting believes in the sanctity of childhood. You know, in the traditional parenting paradigm, we rush to raise our children into adulthood. And here in conscious parenting, I challenge parents to invert this belief system. Instead of looking at childhood as the gateway to adulthood, I tell parents, childhood is the foundation of life. Therefore, childhood is a stage that is the ultimate game changer. It needs to be recognized as a stage onto itself. It is not simply a stepping stone to adulthood. The purpose of childhood is not to create an adulthood. Yes, it happens. It is the foundational blueprint of the adulthood, but it can only be a healthy blueprint if you begin to see childhood as a stage onto itself. The purpose of childhood is so our children have a childhood. What that means is that you understand who children are. Children are not mini adults. Your child is not a mini you. Your child is a child unto themselves. And children have a distinct way of communication, a distinct essence, a distinct blueprint. And we need to connect to that, because if we miss that in childhood, then they will grow up disconnected from who it is they are, and they will be a fake self, a false self. And that's what I talk about ad nauseum in this book, The Parenting Map. How do you connect to your child's essence? What is your child's essence? What is the language of childhood? How to connect to your children? So before I get into more details, I want to just give you an overview of some myths you have, some lies you've been told that you need to debunk right away. You know, the first stage of any change is at the mental level. Because if you do not expose to yourself what your belief systems are about certain things, then you cannot change, because change occurs at your belief system level. The first thing you need to change is the way you believe how that thing should be. If you want to change that thing, you need to first understand what are your belief systems about that thing. So if you want to create a better connection with your children, if you want to empower them, if you want to help them become more resilient, first you need to expose to yourself, what are my belief systems? So in this book, The Parenting Map, the whole first stage, I have 3 stages. The first stage is the mindset shift from frustration to clarity. How do you move from inner chaos and confusion to inner clarity? That is the first step of any change. So the first belief system we need to change is that you believe as a parent that parenting is about raising the child. It is not. That is a lie. Parenting is not about raising the child. And many parents come to me when I say this, and they say to me, well, that is so selfish. If it's not about raising the child, then aren't we being self-absorbed? Isn't it amazing and selfless to focus on the child? And I show parents that no, when you focus on the child, you're actually abnegating your responsibility of raising yourself. It's actually a distraction to focus on the child, and it's unhealthy to focus on the child, because then the child begins to feel this burden of responsibility that they have to make your parenting better, that they have to make you feel better as a parent so that you feel successful. Your child is not your project. Your child is not your next creation. Your child is here to be themselves. And the only way you can allow them to be themselves is if you focus on the right problem. The problem is not your child. You are the problem. You are the problem and the solution. So parenting needs to shift from focused on raising the perfect child to raising the perfect parent, and understanding that there is no perfection. Your perfection comes from understanding that there is no perfection. That is when you become the perfect parent, when you realize that you are imperfect. So conscious parenting is all about how is this reflecting me as a parent. So the next time your tantruming toddler screams at you or bites you or hits you, and you want to scream back at them, instead of trying to change them, you have to ask yourself, how is this tantruming toddler unhinging me from within? How is this tantruming toddler bringing up all my issues around helplessness, around disempowerment, around unworthiness? This is all about me. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to write on your notes, complete the sentence. I became a parent because. So complete the sentence in your journal. I became a parent because. Take a moment. I became a parent because. Now, you can look at what you wrote, but typically when I ask parents this, they have answers such as this. I became a parent because I love children. I became a parent because I wanted a happy family. I became a parent because I had a great childhood and I want to repeat that. I became a parent because I think that this is the way to have a family. If you have written a sentence that begins with the word I became a parent because if that's your first word, then you became a parent for you. And I want to expose to you right there that you had an agenda to become a parent. And you had a fantasy around how that child should be. So the next step we need to take on the parenting journey is to expose this fantasy. What was your fantasy when you became a parent? Was it to have a successful child, a child who's happy all the time, a child who's joyful, a child who loves you, who respects you, who listens to you? Of course you had that fantasy. We all have that fantasy. Again, I want to expose to you that you did not enter this journey to raise the child for who the child should be. You entered this journey to raise the child of your fantasy. When I became a parent, I thought my child would be super much like me, super a mini me, a better version of me, more artistic, more creative, more Zen-like, more calm. And when my child came, and she was such a force unto herself, and she had such a personality, and she had such an idiosyncratic signature that looked nothing like me, guess what? I didn't like her. No, I didn't like her. I wanted to shut down the parts in her that I did not like, and I wanted her to illuminate the parts that I endorsed. Basically, I wanted to create this little puppet, this little project, this little puzzle. I wanted to take out the pieces I didn't like, and I wanted to put pieces that I liked, that made my ego feel good. And this is what we all are unconsciously doing as parents. We are puppeteering this puppet. We are amplifying the parts that we like, and we're dumbing and dimming down the parts we don't like. Be honest with yourself. Aren't you doing this with your kids right now in real time? Yes, you are. And you have to be honest about it. I'm honestly telling you, I didn't like the parts in my daughter that was so wild. She used to not like to comb her hair. She used to like to wear clothes that were like so mismatched. She didn't want to eat breakfast. She wanted to eat her breakfast at dinner and her dinner at breakfast. And she wanted to just defy me all the time. And I was like, hello, can you be a pleaser like I was? Can you be a soft and docile creature like I was? Can you be my fantasy of the good girl? I did not like her. And it was when I exposed to myself that I literally was not enjoying my parenting when she was around 2 years old, that I had my epiphany. And I realized, oh, I'm not enjoying this, not because of my kid. I'm not enjoying this because she's not matching my fantasy. Damn it. She's not meeting my expectations. And I was literally fighting and screaming and tantruming like she was. I was the toddler. And when I had this epiphany, that's when everything changed for me. And I realized, oh my goodness, I wasn't even understanding or recognizing or meeting her where she was. All I wanted was for her to be the person of my fantasy. That's it. I was the rigid one. I was the stubborn one. I was the immature one because I didn't want to raise her for who she was. I wanted to raise her for my ego. And that's when I woke up and realized that I was not being a parent. I was being a parental ego. I was raising my child from my ego. I was not raising my child from my essence. And because I was not connected to my essence, and because I so needed her to be who I needed her to be, so I felt good about myself, I was raising her disconnected from her essence. So she was getting more in her ego because I was in ego. It wasn't her authentic truth to need to defy me. She was only defying me because I was controlling her. You see, our children don't wake up saying, I'm going to make my parents miserable. I am going to defy my parents. They do it because they sense our control. They sense our maniacal desire for authority, for hierarchy, for power. You see, if you don't expose to yourself how power hungry you are, you will not be a conscious parent. And if you are here sitting sanctimoniously thinking, well, I am a conscious parent, wake up. You're not. You're not. Just by saying that, you're not. I'm sorry to tell you, because you have to first realize how power hungry you are, how control freaky you are, and how you are the toddler with the tantrum. And until you go on your knees humbly saying, yes, it's me, yes, it's me, it's me, it's me, it's me, we cannot start this journey called conscious parenting. So it was only when I was on my knees, shredded to the bone, I hit my rock bottom and I had the epiphany that it is not my toddler. It's my problem. I have issues because I want to use my child to make me feel better. I want to use my child's happiness so I can feel happy. So when she's sad and I don't like it, it's because she makes me feel like I am a failure, because I have been indoctrinated to believe that happy children make a successful parent. This whole idea of happiness was the next place I went to debunk, to realize that I was using my child to make me feel happy. I did not want her to touch her sadness. I did not want her to touch her indignation and her big feelings, because when I was a child, my big feelings were denied, were discarded, were ignored. I was told, shh, shh, be a happy girl, because I was told by my parents to be happy for them so they could feel happy. And I was doing the same thing to my kid because big feelings were uncomfortable to me. They made me feel like I was a failure, like I was helpless, because as a child, I didn't learn competency around my own emotional articulation. I didn't know how to connect to my feelings as a child. I wasn't literate. I wasn't articulate. I wasn't expressive. I wasn't safe. And because I wasn't safe with my own feelings, and even to this day, I have issues with being okay with my big feelings, with owning and celebrating and honoring my big feelings and having a channel for expression, even today. So therefore, every time my child has big feelings, I want to shut it down, right? Once my mother was staying with us and my toddler was having big feelings, and my mother said to my toddler, oh my goodness, can I give you an ice cream? Let's go have something to eat. And right there, I saw the problem. When my mother was treating my child, I was like, no wonder I've had weight issues and food issues my whole life, because every time I had big feelings, my mother would give me something to eat. So right there, I could see it, and I broke the pattern in a small way. I told my mother, what does her feelings have to do with food? And she said, well, it'll make her feel better. And I said, no, the only thing that'll make her feel better is for her to go through her feelings in an authentic way and to process her feelings and to have me witness them and honor them and show her that she doesn't have to be afraid of her feelings. You see, our fear of our feelings causes the disconnection. And who begins to do that for our children? we do as parents, right? We disconnect our children from their feeling states because it makes us feel uncomfortable. So instead of trying to create a happy child, create a child who is okay being unhappy. Create a child who feels like they are safe to express their feelings and that they won't break and we won't break. And feelings are just feelings. They come and they go like waves. You know, children are naturally so profoundly equipped to deal with feelings. They feel their feelings like a wave, and then the wave goes, and then they're totally normal again. And you're like, you're traumatized, right? They've just hit you, they've bit you, they've screamed at you. But when the wave passes, they come back to sanity. But you're traumatized because you have issues with big feelings. If you learn to ride the wave with your children, right? Ride the wave. You should know that feelings come and go. If you watch your own feelings, you know the few times that you have watched your feelings, that feelings rise, but they go. And the reason why we haven't learned that is because instead of watching the wave and riding the wave, we have discarded those feelings and disconnected through addictions. We get on the phone, we eat too much, we talk too much, we drink too much, because those were our ways to cope with the big feelings instead of simply riding the wave. So if you're a parent out there who has never really allowed themselves the permission to honor their big feelings, then working with a coach or trying it yourself will allow you to tap in. So the next time you want to go eat too much, or you want to purge too much, or you want to be addicted to the phone, or you want to watch Netflix for hours, or you want to drink too much, or smoke some pot, or eat a gummy laced with marijuana, before you want to escape, try to write your feelings out. Try to feel your feelings out. Ride the wave. Watch the feeling, because this will help you with your children. Children are masters of riding the wave. We disconnect them, and this creates the blueprint for them as adulthood, to enter adulthood, disconnecting from their feelings. The greatest gift you can give your children is not to make them happy all the time, but to give them the resilience that they can deal with their unhappiness, right? Children will not panic at their big feelings. Children are great at experiencing their feelings. They learn to panic and they learn to dislocate and disconnect because we couldn't handle their big feelings. We tried to problem solve. We tried to give them opinions. We interfered instead of just holding space, bearing witness, being observers, trusting that the wave would pass. So raise children who feel that they can handle it. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. You're angry right now. I get it. Mommy upset you right now. I understand. I see that you're angry. I'll give you some space. As they grow older and you're dysregulated, you can leave the space, because you cannot co-regulate with your children until you are in a state of regulation. But if you are panicking, and the panic can look very calm, but it can look very controlling, right? When you tell your children to do this and do that and do the third thing, it's because you are trying to give them your opinion. You're trying to solve their feelings. Feelings cannot be solved. Feelings simply need to be felt, and they need to be released. So watch your own state of regulation, because that is the key to co-regulating with your child. So raising a happy child is not your goal. Raising an authentic child who stays in their body, who feels safe to be who it is they are without being punished, admonished, shushed, or dislocated from their feelings, will grow up into a child, into an adult, into a teenager, and then an adult who trusts themselves, who trusts that they have the inner resources to manage their overwhelming feelings and to manage those feelings of discontentment or failure or shame that may come up in the life course of a human being. So this idea that we need to raise a happy child, or this idea that you are only as happy as your happy child, is a lie. Your happiness is not connected to their happiness, because we're not buying into this idea of happiness as a goal, you see? So when you don't buy into this idea of happiness as a goal, and you buy into the idea of authenticity, now you're not overwhelmed. So if your child is unhappy, you're not overwhelmed. So you're not as least happy as your least happy. You're not as happy as your least happy child, because you are staying grounded in your own authentic experience. Your authentic experience is not enmeshed in your child's experience. There is a healthy boundary between your state of being and their state of being, and you don't cross over into their lane. So my daughter is 20 right now, and if she is unhappy with her friend group, or with her grades, or with her body, it doesn't dislocate me from my state. I'm allowed to be in my state. I've worked hard for my state. If I'm feeling good about my body, or I'm feeling good about my life, I don't need to lose that. My child's experience is hers. She's in her lane. And because I trust her to handle her feelings, I can stay in my lane. And I know that her pain is actually going to make her resilient. So why would I rob her of her pain? She needs to go through the breakups and the hang-ups and the breakdowns, because that's going to create in her the trust and the resilience and the grit that she can manage her life. The goal of a conscious parent is to stay in our own lane and to trust our children can handle their feelings. We come ready-made with the machinery to handle ourselves. We do come with the trust. We do come with the self-worth. Culture takes us out of that. So we as a conscious parent are trying to re-instill that in our children. But we can only do that when we firmly are planted in our own resilience and our own self-worth. So the next idea that you need to debunk, which has come from the traditional parenting paradigm, is this idea that our children need to be successful. And I always say, successful at what? The answer is only one: successful at being more and more of who it is they are. Do not raise a successful child according to culture's scripts. Culture says you need to be extroverted. Culture says you need to be competitive. Culture says you need to be really good and an all-rounder. Conscious parenting says none of that. Conscious parenting says, who are you? Be more of you, because that is more sustainable. If you try to measure up to culture standards of beauty or comparison or competition or success, you are going to live your life in a false state. Be more of who you are. I made the big mistake of pushing my child into a horse riding competition once. I did it one time, and my daughter still doesn't stop giving me hell. Till this date, she gives me hell for the one time I took her to one competition, a horse riding competition. But she's right. You know why she's right? Because she told me, Mom, I don't like competitions. Mom, I don't like to be the center of attention. Mom, I don't like to be scrutinized by judges. Mom, I don't like to be judged. But I didn't listen to her, because culture told me that competition is healthy and competition is good and children need to learn. But I wasn't listening to her. She hated it. And so when she came out of the competition, even though she did so well and I was so proud for a moment, I realized it was all my ego. My child came out, she threw the helmet on the floor, she took out her little braids, she took out the horse riding fancy equestrian jacket, and she threw it in the mud. And she said, Mom, I'm never going to do this again. And she actually lost her love for horses. I have to take responsibility. I'm culpable. And to this day, I'm saying sorry to her, because I made the mistake of not aligning to who she was. Now, some children are hams. They love competitions. Okay, but be careful. If they're really doing it for the love of the sport or the love of the hobby, or they're doing it for the love of the trophy, the love of the validation, the love of the approval. right? So in all these ways, we have to be more conscious, more aware of our secret hidden agenda, our fantasies, our movies, because our movie of this perfect child is in operation and we don't even realize it. And then when the child is not perfect, when the child doesn't listen to you, when the child is average, when the child is ordinary, we find ourselves upset. Why are we upset? Not because the child is being bad. We're upset because the child is not meeting our fantasy. So if we're not aware of our fantasy, we will not be aware of why we're getting angry, and we will justify that it is the child, and then we will justify the punishment. So in conscious parenting, there is no such thing as a good child or a bad child. You know how we go, good, that's a good child. My child is so good, or my child is so challenging. Nope, there is no such thing. There is no such thing as a challenging child. There is no such thing as a bad child. There is no such thing as a troublemaker. There is no such thing as a rebel, because all these labels are coming from our projection. Of course, we will call a child rebellious and defiant if we have too many rules. You see, instead of calling a child rebellious, we should say we have too many rules. Because if you have too many rules and they don't match with who it is your child has no option but to fight back. And then we call them rebellious. But instead of calling them rebellious, let's call ourselves control freaks. Let's call ourselves micromanagers. Let's call ourselves helicopters, because that's the right thing. The child is bouncing off us, you see, but because we think we are right, because we're so sanctimonious and superior, we don't see that our child is reacting off us. Who are we? And who we are is very important in this co-creation, in this equation. And that's what conscious parenting focuses on. Of course, we love good children. Good children comply with our mandates, our dictates, our fantasies. So the next time you call your child good, be careful, because what you're really probably calling is a follower. Your child is a follower. Your child is a complier. Your child is servile. Do you want to raise a follower? Well, if you don't want to raise a follower, then you need to give room for your child to be who it is they are. Stop calling them good or bad. Instead, find out who it is they are and honor them at their essence. So children just are. It is you who wants to raise a particular kind of child. If they follow that subscription, they are good. If they don't, they're bad. And the more rules a family has, the more you're raising good children. But good children are not good human beings. A good child in your book is a compliant child. And that is really speaking to your desire for totalitarian power. And that's really sad. Whenever parents of children come to me and go, my child is an angel, my child is really good. Oh my goodness. I immediately have red flags going up, because that parent who talks about their child in that way is a parent who wants to raise that perfect child, that docile child, that compliant, easygoing child. Now, some children are really easygoing, but be careful, because easygoing children are huge ego strokers for parents. And the child could have been easygoing in their temperament, but then they become this very perfectionistic child, because we take that easy breezy child and then we mold them to become this little perfect puppet and statue. And then that easy breezy child becomes this perfectionistic, obsessive, compulsive child, because we took that child and made them our little puppets. So be very careful with these easy breezy children, because you will then claw into them even more to make them your perfect rendition. And one day that'll crash and burn. Right? It's better in a way to have a quote unquote bad child, because that child challenges your ego right from the start, and you're not even allowed to create a fantasy, because that easy breezy child allows you to create a fantasy. And then when that fantasy crashes, you're devastated. And that's happened to so many parents. So it's almost easier to start off with really low expectations, like I had to do. My kid was so not listening to me, and she crushed my ego so early on that my expectations are so realistic, because really, we're not allowed to have expectations of other people, including our children. And the higher your expectations of the child, the greater the decline, the greater the crumbling when that child has had enough. When that child says, no more, I cannot do this role of good child anymore. So instead of doing that, let your child be who it is they are. So stop trying to raise a successful child, a happy child, a good child, and instead just try to raise yourself. Because the more you raise yourself, the more you will attune to who your child is, and the more your child will stay true to who they are. So when they grow up as adults, they're not going to disconnect, and therefore they're not going to act out or act in. You know, if you have a girl, they'll go get depressed. If you have a boy, they may act out. These are stereotypical lines, and it's not always true. But typically, that's what happens. So you don't want a child to act, period. Because when they act, they're putting on a false self. And that false self will one day create a dissonance in them. Now, it's quite likely that all their life they could be in false self. You and I have been for years in our false self, quite likely, but that's not serving their best interests. We want to raise a child who doesn't enter false self too much. The disconnection between their true self and false self, we want it to be as low a delta as possible. There will be false self because they're in this culture, no doubt. And you will permeate them with some bullshit of yours, no doubt. But the delta should be as low as possible. I have definitely dumped my crap on my kid. 100%, she's already messed up because of my messing her up. But I've tried to do it as minimally. As I began to awaken, I did less and less and less and less. And today she's 20, and I try to not hamper her with my projections, my expectations, my fantasy. So for me, as a conscious parent, and what I teach is that true love, for your children at least, is a love that doesn't control, is a love that doesn't possess, is a love that doesn't own. I see my child as her own being, as a destiny in its own making, as a human in her own right, to make her own mistakes, to mess up and screw up and fuck up in her own way. It doesn't reflect on me. I'm not here to raise a perfect being with the perfect outcome. I'm here to honor who she is in her life journey, and to have her back and to support her, and to tell her when I don't agree. But I check before I don't agree. Is my disagreement coming from my egoic fantasy, or is it truly for her safety, right? My basic one boundary is physical harm, physical safety. The rest, I have to really look deep within and go, is it my ego that doesn't want her to show her cleavage? Or is it truly about her safety? So I'm always checking in to see, is it my ego, my lack, my desire, my emptiness, my unworthiness that is talking here? Or is it truly her in the right alignment with herself? So every decision that she makes, you know, I want to honor it for herself. I don't want to contaminate it with my childhood, with my projections. You know, when she was young, I would so many times find myself saying, in India, we used to do it like this. And in India, we used to do it like that. And she used to be, Mom, I don't live in India. I'm not even that Indian. And you need to realize that you're not American. Mom, this is not how we do it in America, she used to tell me. And I used to feel so offended. And then I used to ask myself, why am I offended? She's right. I'm not American. I haven't grown up here. I have no idea how she's growing up. I cannot even talk. How dare I even talk? So I began to observe and understand her more. And the minute I did that, you know, when you give another human being your understanding, especially your children, you give them your trust. And your trust is not blind. It's actually the vital ingredient for them to trust themselves. You know, parents always say, well, my children need to earn my trust. No, they don't need to earn their trust. The trust is because you trust yourself. You give them trust because they are themselves. Now, of course, when they're young, you don't leave them on their own if they cannot handle themselves. And that's about safety, right? You always keep your children safe. So if they're young, you trust them to be who it is they are, but you also realize that they cannot keep themselves safe. So safety is always important when children are young, but that doesn't mean you don't trust them to know whether they want to wear purple socks or green socks or eat eggs or toast. You give them choices. And the more you empower these young beings with choices, you show them that they have the capacity to check into themselves and to tune into themselves and find their own inner initiative, their own inner governance. So true love is not what you think you have. True love is truly recognizing that you do not own these children, you do not possess these children, and you're not allowed to have this power over them. They have to have this power over themselves. So conscious parenting doesn't come naturally to us. It is something that we need to learn. We need to read books like this one, like my other books, like other people's parenting books, so that we can cultivate this. It is not our instinct. Instinct comes from our patterns, from our childhood. And if we operate out of our childhood conditioning in a knee-jerk way without truly doing the inner work to heal ourselves, then we will be falling into the traditional parenting paradigm and not entering conscious parenting. Conscious parenting takes inner work. It takes daily reflection. It takes looking within to cultivate our own inner wholeness. When we operate out of wholeness, WHOLENESS, instead of HOLE, our wholes, unless we operate out of wholeness, we will project our needs for belonging, significance, identity, and worth through our children. We will use our children to bolster who it is we are. We will live through them. And that is a false way of living. Your child's accolades are not yours. Your child's failures are not yours. Your child's essence is not yours. Once you recognize yourself and meet yourself with self-acceptance, with compassion, and with celebration, then you will accept your child. Every parent who comes to me, every parent who has a conflict with her child or his child, is having a conflict because they do not accept something in their child's life, their child's decision, their child's choices, or their child itself. And the reason they don't accept whatever I've just said in their child is because that jars with their inner belief system, their way of thinking about the world. Therefore, they do not accept their child because they have a belief system that stops them. And that same belief system stops them from themselves. It's something that they will not allow themselves to become. So if their child is gay, for example, at a very big, obvious level, it's because the parent has a belief system that tells them that being gay is bad. Therefore, it's something that if they were gay, they would not accept in themselves. If your child drops out of college and you think that's a bad choice, it's because you have a belief system that says that is bad. Therefore, you have a belief system that doesn't allow you to ever contemplate dropping out of college. So all the ways that we don't accept our children are ways that we don't accept ourselves. So all of what is happening with your children and every intimate relationship, your resistance is because you resist that in your own life. You haven't come to terms with it in your own life. And culture doesn't make it easy. I'm not telling you that culture makes it easy. Culture makes it difficult. If your child drops out of college, or if your child is not an all-rounder, culture will tell you that that child is is a negative. It has debits, has a lesser thanness about them. So culture is constantly talking in our ear that make it very difficult to accept ourselves or our children. But part of being a conscious parent is pushing back against culture's belief systems and breaking them down for yourself, deconstructing what culture has told you is a good parent, is a good child, is a successful adult, a pretty adult, a happy child, a good child. Culture has put so much garbage in us that stop us from connecting to who our children truly are. And if you want to truly connect to your children as they are, you need to stop listening to culture, because culture has lied to us. Culture has told us how we need to be, and that doesn't work for everybody. And so you as a conscious parent need to be brave to push back against the matrix, to break free from the matrix, first in your own life and then in your child's life. I cannot tell you how many mothers especially come to me saying that they feel ugly, that they feel so fat, that they feel like they don't belong in their body, and they're raising daughters. So how do you think that daughter is going to be around you if you as a woman haven't celebrated your aging or haven't celebrated your wrinkles or your cellulite? If you have bought into culture's notion of the standard of beauty and you're fighting against yourself because you want to fit into that mold, your daughter is going to pick up on that. Or if you are a woman who believes she needs to do it all, she needs to be the most masculine man and the most feminine woman, she's going to be burdened by this idea of perfectionism, and her children are going to pick up on it. Or if you're a father and you've decided that, you know, your son needs to be super athletic, and I know I'm talking in traditional gender lines, but go with me for a moment. And you believe your son needs to be the super athlete, or your daughter needs to be the superstar because you're a superstar. Well, then you're going to communicate this to your children. And if your children don't match up to this ideal, then they're going to feel lesser than. So in all sorts of ways, if we have subscribed to culture, we are going to pass this on to our children and insidiously teach them to subscribe to culture. And that's going to be to their detriment. Not every child can subscribe to culture's ideals. So you have to give your child the space to be who it is they are and not put culture on them, and to debunk the lies of culture. That culture is a racist culture, for example. So if you're raising a white child, if you're white and you're raising a white child or whatever, you need to teach your white children about the ills of racism. And if you're raising a brown child, you need to teach the child that they are going to be subjected to racism and that that's a lie, right? It is our responsibility as conscious parents to debunk the lies of culture so we don't burden our children with these belief systems that are toxic and dysfunctional. So conscious parenting is not just an individual act of bravery. It is a culturally, revolutionarily a brave act. It is about changing culture, one child at a time, one parent at a time. So I thank you for listening to this talk on conscious parenting. Conscious parenting is deep. It's all about you doing your work, about raising yourself, about becoming whole. It is an act of courage. It is an act of activism. It is truly a deeply spiritual act of doing your inner work. It is transformational. It is profound. So grab a copy of my book, The Parenting Map, and I wish you well on your journey in becoming the most conscious parent you can be, because your children deserve this. Your children deserve an empowered, resilient, conscious parent so that they can truly be free to manifest their life's destiny with their own footprint, blueprint, and signature. Thank you for listening to me. You can find more of my courses at drshefali.com. I have a Conscious Parenting Institute where I train people to become conscious parenting coaches. So if you're looking for a new career with purpose and service, you may want to explore becoming one of my coaches. Thank you for having me. I've been so honored to share this information with you.